Hi everyone. By the end of this class, you'll be able to compare different jobs using adjectives and nouns. For example, let's say that you're considering being a fashion designer or an accountant. Being a fashion designer is more interesting than being an accountant. Or maybe you're considering working as a doctor or a nurse. So a doctor has worse hours than a nurse. So in order to express these ideas, we need to use adjectives and nouns to make these comparisons. So let me do the following. Let me just present the structure. But before we do that, what I would like to do is present this comparison structures. Let me just quickly point out that all the comparisons that we're going to do in this class and also the following, we're just going to use these few comparisons. As you can see, we're going to use these words to make the comparisons. So as you can see, we could say more, and here in the middle we will include an adjective, and then we'll include than, and that will make the comparison there. On the other hand, we could use less, and at the same time we'll use an adjective there. So a quick example, being a fashion designer is more interesting than being an accountant. Okay, or being an accountant is less interesting than being a fashion designer, and so on and so forth. I guess also, since I pointed out a doctor has worse hours than a nurse, or a nurse has better hours than a doctor. And then we're going to use this other ones here to point out that they might have similarities, that they might be the same or that they might not be the same. And so that's what we're going to be doing in this class. So let's try to make the comparison between two jobs. What we'll do is we'll select these first two, as you can see here. So we have this one looks like a lawyer, and picture number two looks like a mechanic. So let's make the comparison between lawyer and a mechanic. Before we do that, we want to have some work-related adjectives in mind, such as stressful, fantastic, fascinating, difficult, easy, interesting, dangerous. And of course, there are many more, but because of time, we're not going to go through a lot of other adjectives. And we also want to have, or we want to consider work-related nouns. So what are nouns? They're just people, places, or things, right? So in this case, when we think about jobs, we want to think about things like hours, like how many hours you work, education, how much education do you have, work, does your job consist of doing a lot of work, right? And these are the kind of things that we want to keep in mind in order for us to make these comparisons. So what can we say about a lawyer versus, let's say, a mechanic, right? We want to make the comparison between those two. Well, we could say the following. I think we could say that working as a lawyer is more stressful than working as a mechanic. And then, so we will use an adjective in this case. I decided to use the adjective stressful. And I think it's also important to mention that this is an opinion, right? So my opinion could be different than yours. You could think the opposite of this. So I wouldn't know neither one of those two because I never worked as a lawyer or as a mechanic, so I wouldn't know which one is more stressful. But it sounds like the lawyer is more stressful, right? And the way that we do it is, well, notice that we're continuing using general phrases similar to the previous class that we had, where we learned how to make general phrases. So working as a lawyer is more stressful than working as a mechanic. At the same time, you could say working as a mechanic is less stressful than working as a lawyer, and that's in essence is basically the same sentence, right? But it's just in a different way. Working as a mechanic is less stressful than working as a lawyer. Here we go. And the reason I did this is because I quickly wanted to point out that we can use either more or we could also use less, right? So what else could we say about a lawyer and a mechanic? Is as interesting as working as a mechanic. So if I absolutely love cars, then definitely I think that working as a mechanic is very interesting. So in this case, I wanted to point this one out because I want to express that both jobs are the same. So to me, both jobs have the same level, if you will, right? They are the same. One is not better than the other. And again, this is my opinion because I love cars, and I also think that lawyers are interesting, and the work that the lawyers do is very interesting. So again, I want to point out that in this case, I'm using adjectives to make the comparisons. What I want to do next is use nouns to make the comparisons. So what kind of nouns can we think about when we think about comparing these two jobs? Well, previously I mentioned that we can think of things like hours, maybe education, or perhaps the type of work that people do. So, well, lawyer and mechanic, it usually is the case that a lawyer has more education than a mechanic, right? So in this case, we can say that a lawyer has more education than a mechanic. This is the noun that I am using to compare. What else can we say about the two jobs? Well, I could probably say that a mechanic has better hours than a lawyer. Okay, and in this case, as you can see, I used the one here in the middle, better, and in the middle I included the noun to make the comparisons, right? So the noun that I'm using to compare, it's hours. At the same time, I could say a lawyer has worse hours than a mechanic. Okay, and perhaps I could say that working as a mechanic isn't as much work as working as a lawyer. So what I would like for you to do now is I would like for you to look at all of these jobs. I will be publishing this document here. Okay. So we got there's a model, there's a journalist, there's a photographer, a painter, and just choose randomly two jobs that you would like to compare.